Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Spider-Geddon miniseries as we take a look at Spider-Geddon number 2. So, last time on Spider-Geddon. In an attempt to perfect the art of heroics, Otto Octavius, aka the Superior Octopus, formerly Doc Ock, managed to replicate the Inheritors' cloning technology so that every time he died, his mind would be transferred to a new clone body, much like the Inheritors. Unfortunately, though, the Inheritors, who managed to gain access to dimensional technology thanks to the Web Warriors' spider drones that they sent to keep an eye on them on Earth 3145, managed to send a signal to his cloning vats so that they could start building the Inheritors' new clone bodies that they could jump into when their current bodies keeled over, effectively allowing them to escape their prison. The Web Warriors wound up catching wind of this signal being sent out, and wound up going to Earth 616 in an attempt to warn Otto what had happened, even picking up Miles Morales from that world to try and help them out. Unfortunately, while they did finally manage to convince Otto of what the Inheritors were doing, sadly it was too little too late, as by the time they did that, the Inheritors, at least 3 of the Inheritors managed to escape from Earth 3145, specifically Morlun, Genix, and Verna, who upon waking up managed to kill 2 of the assembled Spideys there, specifically Spider-Man Noir and Spider-UK, with last issue ending with the Inheritors now turning their attention to the rest of the Spider-themed superheroes, and this issue begins with that fight continuing, well, minus 1 Inheritor. This is where the tie-ins to Spider-Geddon start coming in, as like Moreland said in the last issue, he has a vendetta with the Peter Parker of this world, so in between issues, he essentially fucked off to go into tie-in country so he could go fight with Peter. In the meantime, only Verna and Genix remain, and, well, Genix is now prepping the cloning vats to bring the remainder of their siblings over to this world, specifically Brix, Bora, and Deimos, as they are still on Earth 3145. Of course, the assembled Spideys don't want to let that happen, so immediately everyone just goes on the offensive and starts duking it out with them. Unfortunately, though, they all know that the Inheritors are still exceedingly powerful in their new forms, so Gwen decides, why don't we just blow them up? As she ends up asking Otto, you're a supervillain, right? Does your lair have a self-destruct? And while Otto takes offense to still being called a supervillain, he does admit, yeah, the base does have a self-destruct. As such, he and the other Spideys decide to distract the Inheritors, while Octavia goes to Otto's computers and sets the base to self-destruct, which she's able to do because, again, she's an alternate Doc Ock, so she knows how her counterpart's technology operates, even compliments it because she thinks it's so intuitive. But point is, the assembled Spideys do end up holding off the Inheritors, but again, even with all their help, it's still too much of an issue to hold them in place. As such, when Octavia finally does manage to activate the base's self-destruct, apologies if you're hearing crunching in the background, Chindy's chewing on a bone over there, but by the time that Octavia finally manages to get the base to blow, sadly the Inheritors are still very capable, and Genix is still operating on the cloning vats and realizes that with the base about to blow up, he's got to get the remainder of their siblings up and at him before it's too late. As such, Gwen volunteers to stay behind and hold them off, while the other Spideys retreat. And while Miles tries to convince her not to do this, Gwen says it's fine. She still has her dimensional watch. She can just pour right out of here before everything goes kaput. So the other Spideys need to run out of there and web up the place so the Inheritors can't escape. Yeah, assured by that, the other Spideys do leave and do web up the entrance. Unfortunately, though, when Gwen goes back to start duking it out with Verna and Genix, well, again, she's one spider person versus the Inheritors, and as we established, even fighting one Inheritor is a very challenging task. And as such, when Gwen goes to confront Verna manages to grab her right away and even grabs at her wrist, because guess what? She overheard what Gwen said about her watch being able to pour it out of here, so Verna immediately just wants to get her hands on that, which even to kind of add insult to injury, there are 2 other dead spider people in this room, both of whom were part of the Web Warriors, who were an interdimensional team of Spideys. So they have wristwatches like this too, so they have other ways of getting this. But as such, the Inheritors do have an escape route. But Verna decides to not take the watch right away because, hey, she has a spider person here. She may as well feast on her. So immediately she tries to feast on Gwen's life force, but immediately gets halted. And it's here where I need to kind of bring in a bit of continuity from Spider-Gwen's own book, because yeah, after the events of Spider-Verse, Spider-Gwen wound up getting her own solo series, which did focus on how her world operated and so forth, with all the stories that took place in it. I own a few volumes of the book of her standalone. It's a pretty good comic. Do want to complete the collection one day, but that's neither here nor there. But there is one thing from those books that does carry over into Spider-Geddon. Specifically, during the crossover storyline Spider-Woman, Gwen sadly wound up losing her powers, and while she was able to find a temporary way of getting around that, that's all it really was. Temporary. As such, Gwen was trying to find ways to get her spider powers back, and she did end up finding one. Specifically through her world's version of the Venom symbiote, which she wound up bonding with, and yeah, it did end up giving her spider powers again, but it also kind of sort of turned her into her world's Venom. Thankfully, she was able to overcome the symbiote's own violent mind manipulating tactics. So now she's thankfully in control of the costume and utilizing how the symbiote can change its form. She actually molded it so now it looks like her regular traditional Spider-Woman outfit. So instead of being all black, it's now it's like the white, blue, and pink that you can associate with Spider-Gwen. Point is though, while she does have her spider powers back, she gets them because she's bonded with a symbiote. And the thing is, the symbiote doesn't exactly want its host to be feasted on, does it? So the instant Verna tries draining Gwen of her life force, the symbiote immediately attacks Verna, which even Verna admits makes feeding complicated. So she might just have to kill Gwen. Unfortunately, though, Gwen's attempt at a distraction was successful, as the base starts counting down to 0, everything goes boom, with the other Spideys just watching outside, waiting to see Gwen show up. But sadly, Verna did manage to succeed in grabbing Gwen's watch, and well, the other Spideys don't see her when everything goes to hell. So, as such, immediately they're all afraid because they're wondering what the hell, and even Miles is just acting all worried, like, oh shit, where's Gwen, did she sacrifice herself? But, however, Otto is not really concerned with whether Gwen survived or not. The more important thing he's worried about is if the Inheritors survived, and sadly, yeah, they did. Like Genix said, they had at least 3-dimensional teleporters in that base alone, and unfortunately they used them properly, as thanks to Otto's Octobots that are spread around San Francisco, he does get a reading from one of them that showcases, yep, the Inheritors managed to make it out utilizing the stolen dimensional watches, with Verna even brandishing Gwen's like a trophy, which, yeah, that's not exactly good. Also, they all got their traditional clothes back, because I guess Otto had technology that could replicate fabric, which actually makes sense, because even the clone bodies came out fully dressed. So I suppose he would have something that would make fabric on this right away. And yeah, Genix used it to make them to not only give him and his siblings, not only give him and Verna clothes, but it turns out he was also successful in bringing back the remainder of the Inheritors as well, as Brix, Bora, and Deimos also are there. As such, the Inheritors immediately start spreading the resources, as Genix tells Deimos, Brix, and Bora to help him as they have to find a way to set up shop in this world, because after all, without Otto's lab, they need to recreate their cloning technology another way. And there is a place in this universe that they can do that. Specifically, New Horizon Labs' new U facility, which actually kind of ties back into the clone conspiracy, which I'll get to in a minute. But put simply, yeah, that place has all the cloning tech they need, and Otto quickly realizes that, and even kind of is angry at himself for having gotten this far. Which, believe it or not, I kind of like that. I like that Otto is actually angry with himself, because technically this is kind of sort of his fault. But either way, yeah, the Inheritors go off to do that while Verna goes off to do her own thing. But in the meantime, the assorted Spideys realize they need to regroup, especially since they do now believe that something has happened, that Gwen is more than likely dead, considering that Verna has her watch. So as such, the remaining Spideys end up opening up a portal back to Loom World, which everyone goes through, as they know the Inheritors are out. They need to be stopped right away, and considering how much of a threat they were the last time, they're gonna need all hands on deck again, as immediately everyone decides they need to gather as many Spideys as they can in order to take them, with some of the assorted Spideys even believing that they should get people like Peter Parker, Jessica Drew, or Anya Corazon, since last time they were invaluable members of the team, and with Peter Parker even being, as Miles calls it, their quarterback, and hell, even Anya is connected to all the spiritual totem shenanigans, so she should be involved in this in some regard. But Otto disagrees with them, and this is kind of sort of where we get back to that loose hanging thread from Spider-Verse, where Otto talked to Ashley Barton and Assassin Spider-Man about having to potentially kill the Inheritors should worst come to worst. And, well, we see him advocating for that too, as yes, while he is taking the blame for letting the Inheritors out of their proverbial bottle, he also believes that they wouldn't have come to this if people like those Spideys that were just mentioned hadn't stopped him from doing what he needed to do, so to speak. That because of their morality, they're just as much responsible for this as he is, and that they need to take a more permanent solution. Of course, some of the assorted Spideys immediately think, no, that's not a good idea. You're nuts. We're not doing that. But some of the assorted Spideys also think that they should. Specifically, Hobie Brown and Octavia Otto. Because, yeah, while Hobie Brown is a superhero, he's also willing to kill. And that was established as early as his short story in Spider-Verse number 2. After all, you have to remember, in that story, he caved Norman Osborn's head in. He is very much willing to kill someone if he thinks it's necessary. And right now, he more than believes it's necessary, especially since, in his own words, if they had killed the Inheritors and they had the chance, then maybe people like Spider-UK and Spider-Man Noir would still be alive. So he thinks that, he's actually siding with Otto on this. He thinks that if they wanted to beat the Inheritors, they need to take them out permanently. And Octavia, while she is a more heroic version of Otto, even she realizes that this might be necessary. It's clearly something she doesn't think she's not completely comfortable with, but considering the circumstances, she is siding with her main universe counterpart on this, with even Otto saying that she's doing that because, hey, she's a genius, which I'll talk about my feelings on that in a minute, but I love that Otto just keeps complimenting Octavia. As such, from here, the Spideys just kind of get split down the middle, with one side advocating for killing the Inheritors, and the other side advocating for finding an alternate solution, with Otto heading one side and Miles heading the other. As such, while they do kind of butt heads a little, Karn immediately stops them and tells them, look, with my family free, the future is kind of cloudy right now. I don't know which one of your actions is going to lead to the proper outcome, but as such, I'm essentially just going to put my eggs in both baskets. And so he ends up giving dimensional watches to both Otto and Miles. Or pretty much he gives watches to everybody and just tells them, whatever course of action you think is the best, take it. We need to beat my family, and I don't care how we do it. And as such, basically both sides split up, with Otto, Hobie, and Octavia going off with Otto, while Miles and Co go off to get their own recruits. With Miles saying he's going to go off to try and get Peter on their side, while the remaining Spideys go and start recruiting. With us seeing one of those recruits in Edge of Spider-Geddon number 2 when Spider-Ham went to go get Penny. Speaking of which, kind of going back to Otto, we see that he and his team have actually gone back to Earth 616. Because Otto kind of needs to get a change of clothes. In the battle with the Inheritors, 2 of his tentacles were sadly damaged, so he needs a new outfit. And with Hobie taking his dimensional teleporter to go and get more Spideys on this side, with Hobie most likely going off to get Spider-Norman, since, we saw him recruit him during Edge of Spider-Geddon number 4. But in the meantime, Otto thinks he might need a bit of a change. He might need a change of identity, so to speak, because after all, this is a war of spiders, after all, and as I mentioned, the Superior Octopus title kind of has a bit of baggage to it. So while he has Octavia go tend to his spider bots, he decides that it's time to reclaim his former title, specifically that of the Superior Spider-Man. And yes, it is still awesome seeing him in that costume. I love it. It's a good costume. And even upon donning the costume, he yells out, "The die is cast," which even Octavia's like, "Oh, I've always wanted to say that," but I thought everyone would think I was weird. But either way, yeah. Either way, yeah. With the two Autos in the same room together, they immediately start brainstorming ways to try and take down the Inheritors. With both sides, with both Autos believing that if they want to take down the Inheritors, then they need to gather recruits that are like them, that are like-minded, have similar mindsets, or if the need arises, can be convinced to join their side. And while Octavia mentions, well, what about the Peter Parker of this world that Miles went to go after? Otto just kind of brushes it off, saying that he really doesn't think that that's worth getting, since after all, Moreland went to go kill that world's Peter, and odds are he might be dead, so it's not even worth going after him. With even a brief glimpse as we see Miles and Peter duking it out with Moreland in Peter's tie-ins. But Otto does admit, while he is loath to accept it, Peter does have qualities that he could believe would make him a valuable asset. And in the infinite multiverse, there probably are versions of Peter that would be predisposed to listening to Otto. And so, sure enough, as Otto and Octavia start viewing through parallel worlds, looking for Spider people to recruit, they happen to glance at the world of the Insomniac Spider-Man. And, well, that's what leads into the events of Spider-Geddon number 0. So, there you go. But in the meantime, before Otto goes to recruit that Spider-Man, he does realize that there are some Spideys that will be kind of necessary in the oncoming battle with the Inheritors. As such, he ends up opening a portal not to another world, but to Las Vegas, Nevada, specifically to go meet with Kane, aka the second Scarlet Spider. As in Spider-Verse, he was the host of the Other, and considering how the Other was meant to be one of those things that could take out the Inheritors, he does believe that he might be a valuable asset against them now. Unfortunately, though, after Otto explains the situation to Kane admits that he is no longer the Other, as after all, because it turns out, while the Other is kind of sort of the reason why Kane was brought back to life at all, it's out of his system now. He's no longer playing host to it, so now he's just another plain old Spider-Man like all of them. Although he does still have his own unique spider powers every here and there. It's just that he no longer has the spiky spikes. But he is still willing to join Otto's side because Kane Parker is still very much a tough bird and is kind of willing to kill the Inheritors. Although before he goes off to join Otto's side of the Spider Army, he does ask, "Hey, do you want to get Ben Reilly on our side?" And Otto's not exactly for that because, well, Ben was kind of cuckoo. And it's here where I really do finally need to talk about the clone conspiracy here. So, I mentioned how Ben Reilly was one of the more famous Spider clones, how he was the original Scarlet Spider and formed his own heroic identity, even taking on the mantle of Spider-Man himself temporarily, and how he had died. Yeah, he got revived in the main universe. But it wasn't a good revival. Basically, what had happened was that the original Jackal had revived the good Mr. Reilly, but he tortured him. Specifically, he kept killing him over and over and over. And every single time he killed Ben, he revived him again in a new body. And he kept doing it. And the thing is with Ben, he could remember each of those deaths, one after the other, and let's just say it wasn't exactly pleasant. And just being killed and revived so often, it kind of broke Ben. So much so that when he was finally brought back to life, when he was finally brought back proper and was no longer getting killed over and over, his mind was damaged and he went kind of insane. So much so that he wound up taking on the mantle of the Jackal himself, forming the new New Horizon tech, and, well, being the one, and ultimately utilizing his own knowledge and expertise, he recreated the Jackal's cloning tech and set in motion the events of the clone conspiracy, acting as the big bad for that story. Now, after the events of the story, he did try to go back to the side of the Angels, even reclaiming the mantle of the Scarlet Spider and kind of sharing the title with Ben. But sadly, he couldn't totally beat that insanity streak. His demons are still in here, and despite his best efforts, it was a hard battle to fight. And sadly, at the end of Ben's own solo series, he kind of did dip back into the realm of insanity. So, Yeah, while Ben may be revived, he's not all there. And this was before the whole chasm thing and dark web, so yeah, the writers really do not like Ben Reilly, do they? However, kind of going back to the present storyline, while Otto is not willing to have Ben Reilly join his army, and so join his army, and thus taking King back with him to King back with him. Turns out that Ben was actually on the scene at the time and was eavesdropping on what Otto and Kane were saying, and he did hear about how the Inheritors were utilizing his new U tech to create new clone bodies, and Ben is not exactly for that, and so unbeknownst to Otto or Kane, he jumps into the portal after him to kind of sort of force them to let him join their army. However, things are not exactly well in the multiverse. Kind of going back to Loom World, after the various Spideys kind of went off to do their own thing, Karn was left alone on Loom World and essentially kind of bid all the spiders good luck and Godspeed and all that crap. But it turns out he had a secondary reason for being as hasty with his decision as he was. It turns out he actually is not alone, as the first world that Verna went to on her journeys was Loom World, and she is now right behind Karn and ready to fight him. And Karn, well, he's more than willing to fight his sister too. As such, the pair of inheritors start duking it out right there in the throne room of Loom World, and while Karn fully believes that he can take Verna on a fair fight, even managing to skewer her with one of his robotic spider legs, unfortunately, this only gave Verna the opening she wanted, as when he pulls her in close to let her know, you may not believe this, but I don't take joy in doing this. Verna just says, "Don't worry, brother, I do," as she just grabs Karn and starts sucking out his life force. How? Well, here's the thing. I mentioned before how Karn was kind of sort of the Loom World version of Spider-Man when he took on the mantle of the Master Weaver. I also meant that in the sense that he is also a spider totem. By becoming the Master Weaver, he became a true blue spider totem, meaning that he was also a prime meal for the Inheritors. And well, utilizing that to her advantage, Verna siphons her brother's life force and kills him, dropping his body on the throne room floor before giving this giant speech about how the Inheritors are back and how she will use this new watch to travel back to Earth 3145 and find the crystal containing their father's essence, because if they can have that, then they can revive him proper too. But she ends up wrapping up that speech by proclaiming, "Who will stop us?" Before we then cut to another universe, another version of New York. And we see that Spider-Gwen is alive and well. Unfortunately, though, Verna did indeed manage to steal her watch, and so while she is alive, she now is trapped in a parallel world and has no means of contacting her friends or escaping. And well, that's where that issue ends. So, my thoughts on this comic? It's good. I do like it. But I will say this, there is some aspects of it that I find somewhat annoying. At least one aspect. So, remember when I was talking about the Superior Octopus and I had some issue with the continuity flubs of having Otto know how the Inheritors cloning tech operated because he claimed to have seen it despite never having actually seen it during the events of Spider-Verse? Yeah, we kind of got another example of that with Karn here. Because, quite frankly, I don't understand why he was killed in that sense. Like, here's the thing. Let me approach this from two different angles. One, let's go with the timey-wimey angle. If you remember back in Spider-Verse, the whole thing with the Master Weaver was that he was essentially a future version of Karn. He was clearly older, and there were clearly signs that Karn was meant to hold the position of the Master Weaver. As when they unmasked the original Master Weaver, he not only had his face, but when they took him out of his legs, they saw that his pants were the same as Karn's. And the means of even opening the legs was Karn's spear, which, despite being something that Karn himself made, it fit perfectly into the Master Weaver's body so that they could open up the robotic shell. Which can kind of imply that Karn was always meant to be the Master Weaver, and that because of how because of how the job worked, eventually time would be kind of circular for him, and he would be exactly in this position. How he would be eventually the guy that was captured by the Inheritors and whose power was being abused by them so they could travel the multiverse and conquer worlds and all that crap. So why was he killed here? And before you say, well, he himself said that the future is hazy because his family's around, so maybe he was brought... So maybe, just maybe, them being around has altered the future. But that still really doesn't make sense. Because after all, the web of life and destiny is supposed to be the very foundation of reality. To do anything to the web is tantamount to affecting not just one universe, but all of them. Shred enough pieces of the web and things will start getting wonky. Because after all, to give an example, when the Inheritors went to go fight the original Master Weaver, all they had to do was snip a few threads and his home became becoming unraveled. He even managed to snip one other thread and erase the Inheritor's mother. So it's a very big thing, and they established that when they established that essentially the Master Weaver himself almost existed kind of outside the regular flow of time and space, that eventually with enough time and patience he would be back in his position. Yes, he existed in one form or another, but they've even stated that the web is like a fourth dimensional configuration that the only reason it looks like a web as it does is because it exists. That's how our minds interpret it. That's how we are able to interact with it. In a higher sense, it's something much greater than what we see. It's not just a regular web, it's the very fabric of time and space in a web form. And that part of the reason why the various Spideys in the multiverse have the powers they are is because, technically speaking, they are a part of it. That the web has essentially ensnared them in its threads. They are like living extensions of the web. It's why it can reach across all time and space, so that no matter how a spider person got their powers, whether it's by magical means or scientific means, they're all connected to it. So, in essence, that means that Karn should have been fine. But he isn't, no. He just straight up dies. So it feels strange that they're able to do that despite Spider-Verse showing that the original Master Weaver was meant to be an older version of Karn. And on top of that, therein lies a secondary issue. Why did Verna kill him? Before you say, well, it's because he was helping the various spider people. Of course, yes, but he's also the Master Weaver. He's one of the few people in the multiverse who can effectively utilize the web of life and destiny, manipulate its skeins and open portals, and interact with the multiverse. So shouldn't they want to keep him alive? And before you say, well, they have the dimensional watches, they can still do that. Well, what happens when they break? What happens if the watches break or that they get damaged? Wouldn't it be more effective to have the guy who can create new watches, or hell, not even use watches, just have him on standby and back in the position of the last guy, and do that to effectively manipulate the web? And before you tell me, well, maybe they're being more cautious since the Master Weaver was manipulating things behind the scenes to take them down, which, fair enough, but at the same time, you think they would take countermeasures for that? Like maybe Verna could knock him out and then bring him back, and then they create new shackles and say, oh, by the way, don't try any thoughts of resisting us. Don't manipulate things so that things will eventually go your way. No, you live to serve us. Because even the original Master Weaver said that while he was bound by what the Inheritors wanted him to do, he could do little things. So if they tried covering their bases better, they could still have things go their way. Yeah, so I do kind of think of this as a problem. And yes, it does effectively neuter the Spider Army, and it is a shocking moment, but it also just feels short-sighted is what I'm saying. Yes, he resisted you in the original... Yeah, Karn resisted the Inheritors in the original Spider-Verse, and without him, the Spideys don't have as much easy access to the multiverse as they did then. But at the very least, it's still, I think, a bad idea to kill the Master Weaver off like that. Hell, in the original Spider-Verse, when Otto killed the last guy, Moreland was fucking horrified. He was like, dude, why the hell would you do that? That guy is the guy that weaves the web of life and destiny, the very fabric of the multiverse. Why'd you just off him like that? So it feels like a stupid idea to just to kill him off. It's very short-sighted and doesn't really make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. And it still very much conflicts with the whole timey-wimey thing. And again, before you could make the argument that maybe time was altered, but I'd still kind of find that to be iffy at best. So I'm going to consider that a bit of a weird continuity flub and a hiccup. With that being said, though, there is still aspects of the story that I do genuinely enjoy. While it does annoy me to see Karn get killed off so easily, I like seeing the army once again form. And I do like that right off the bat they showcase that the Inheritors are still very much a big threat. Like, just having them around, the Spideys have to just go right on the offensive. And the Inheritors are more than a match for the Spideys in their current state. And you have to remember that these are the Inheritors while the Inheritors' bodies are renewed because of their new are renewed because as Genix said, their bodies are completely refreshed and have been quote unquote fed, so to speak. These guys have been locked away for maybe a year or two. So odds are they could still be and they could be very much out of practice. And yet, upon waking up, they immediately just start getting ready to kill. And and even then, they still manage to escape. And the Spideys know that the first thing they're going to want to do is recreate their cloning technology, since after all, that was their ace in the hole during the last Spider-Verse. That if anything happened to them, their minds would be transferred to another clone body, and they'd be all fine and dandy. So in that sense, they are still considered a grave threat, and I do like how the stakes are being raised there, especially since, unlike with Spider-Verse, we now have a split in the army. And I like that, again, this is a plot thread that kind of sort of is getting picked up from Spider-Verse. Not in the same way that you would think it was, so I'm still going to consider that a problem in the original Spider-Verse storyline. But it's still interesting to see this split, because while Spider-Man across the multiverse tends to follow the same mantra of with great power there must also come great responsibility, depending on the Spider-Man depends on how they would interpret that saying. As we've seen in Spider-Verse and even in the Edge Up books, there are different kinds of Spider-Man across the multiverse, and a lot of them, while typically being the good guys, tend to operate on different levels of morality. Some are more the bright, squeaky clean Spidey that we are more familiar with, while some typically kind of teeter on the edge, so to speak, and kind of dip into the dark. Some are somewhere in the middle. And so it makes sense whether there would still be some Spideys in the multiverse who, despite being more goody-goody, would be more willing to kill the Inheritors. And so kind of seeing the split between them, as now that these big bads are back, the Spideys are now arguing over what side they need to take, whether they need to spare them or just straight up kill them. I find that interesting, and it makes sense that the split would develop from this, because after all, the Inheritors are exceedingly powerful, and yes, they stopped them last time by trapping them on Earth 3145, but odds are that plan isn't going to work a second time. The Inheritors are not just going to jump into a random portal and let themselves be taken down, and the thing is, the Spideys managed to kind of win in Spider-Verse because of the element of surprise. After all, the Inheritors overestimated their chances, and the Spiders did manage to find new ways of taking them down. Because after all, the Inheritors' big plan in Spider-Verse was to kill the bride and the scion and spread their blood on the web of life and destiny. And so through that, they would stop the existence of other spider totems. That plan got foiled, and because of sheer numbers and the added weight, because of sheer numbers and the Spideys having new advantages, the Inheritors got their asses handed to them. So it's odd. So the thing is, the Inheritors aren't going to make that choice again, which might explain why Verna went to go kill Karn, because he was still technically an Inheritor on the Spidey side, so taking him out would kind of neuter them. I still think it's a stupid decision, because after all, he's still the Master Weaver, but I can kind of sort of start seeing the logic there. But with that being said, it's still very interesting to see. It's still interesting to see it's interesting to see the Spideys just kind of breaking off because of this. To have one side thinking they can just find another way to trap the Inheritors, while the other side says, no, we need to just take them off the board. I like that. And I like seeing this, and I like seeing them just start gathering their armies based on those doctrines. Because yeah, we do see some unique and varied versions of Spider-Man because of that. Some that kind of align more with the goody two-shoes Spider-Man, while some are more willing to do some more morally questionable things to get the job done. I like seeing that, and I like how how that goes around. And kind of to represent that, we have Otto. For starters, I like seeing Otto actually still trying to be a good guy, and if I can give credit where it's due, I love the chemistry that Otto and Octavius and Octavia Otto have because they're two different versions of the same guy, and despite Octavia being the more tried and true version of a good version of Otto just like they just go their chemistry is perfect because after all, they're still Otto. While one may be good, may have been good all the time, while one is trying to get there. Their minds think very similarly. They have the same level of intelligence with one another. And what I love is that anytime Otto talks to his female counterpart, he has nothing but nice things to say to her. He's like, "You there, you're an alternate version of me. You can do this, right?" Ryson said, "Yeah, I can do it. This is also intuitive." And when she sides with him and says, it's like, "I may not be okay with it, but I think this is the best course of action." He's like, "Of course you think it's the best course of action. You're a genius." It's just great. And when she compliments him for when he shouts out the Dias Cast, she's like, "Wow, I've always wanted to say it." It's like, "You shouldn't really think what idiots have." It's like, I've always wanted to say that, but I was concerned what other people would think. And his response is, "You really shouldn't trouble yourself with what idiots think." I love that! It's honestly kind of funny. It's just really cool to see Otto kind of stroking his proverbial dick with this alternate version of himself. It's just like, unlike he's basically just looking at his other self and thinking, "Oh yes, I'm awesome no matter the universe, aren't I?" It's funny. It's legitimately funny, and it's kind of nice to see them getting along. You would think that because of how intelligent they are, Otto might be a little jealous, but no. He's essentially looking at this and thinks, "You're me. That means you're competent, so you'll do." I love that. It's fun. I love that. It's kind of nice, and kind of going again off of Otto. I like that we're actually seeing development here. As I mentioned, one of the things that we saw in the Superior Octopus was Otto trying to put his best foot forward in going back to being a good guy. Yes, like I said, during Secret Empire, he fell back into old habits and went full supervillain. But as we saw in the Superior Octopus and here, he's trying to go back to being a good guy. And we see that he actually is taking those steps as we see him taking those steps here. Case in point, when the Inheritor, while he didn't believe the Web Warriors when they came to his lab and told him your technology will allow the Inheritors to escape, when he did realize they were telling the truth, and at least a handful of Inheritors managed to come out of his tanks, the last words he said to himself were, "What have I done?" He fully blames himself. While Otto may not be fully willing to accept the blame, but he's still willing to hold on to a lot of it, and he does not like that one bit. He knows that part of this is his fault, and that if he hadn't done what he did, the Inheritors would still be trapped, and he's kicking himself for it. We see that throughout the comic. When he realized the Inheritors are going after the new U technologies to recreate their cloning vats, he's upset. He even says, it's like, "Damn me for," yells out, "Damn me for a fool." And when Octavia tries calming him down and say, come on, if you're anything like me, if you're anything like I think you are, then you're not going to take your feet lying down. And Otto's like, "Yeah, I don't. No, I don't." And look at all the good it did me. I like that because it's again Otto reflecting on his own faults here, because it was his unwillingness to accept defeat that kind of sort of led to this. Him developing the cloning vats and creating them explicitly like the Inheritors' old technology is kind of what led to the Inheritors having their back door out of Earth 3145. And Otto fully knows that if he just hadn't done that, then the Inheritors would still be trapped. Then his world wouldn't be in danger. It's honestly I like seeing that. I like seeing how it progresses throughout the story. And we even see that as Otto starts forming his army. Yes, he still believes he's in the right when it comes to the Inheritors, and he still does not have a lot of nice things to say about Peter Parker, but he also is willing to take some compromises when he's building said army, as he realizes that while he does not have a high opinion of Peter, he does have qualities that do make him a valuable asset asset, which he does know because of all of his experience duking it out with the guy. So he does think that while he isn't willing to get the main universe Peter Parker, he does think there are versions of Peter across the multiverse who might help them, which is what leads to him recruiting the Insomniac Spider-Man, since as we established, the Spidey of that world was the student of his world's Otto Octavius. So considering that history, he might be in a position to listen to the main universe Otto on this. So I like that. I like that. It's still arrogant and manipulative, but it shows that he does at least admire some parts of Peter and believe that he can work on that. On top of that, he also is willing to. On top of that, he still goes to Kane and because he realizes, okay, the other was a valuable asset in the last army. We might need him for this one. And then even when Kane says, look, I don't have the other, but I'm willing to join your side, I liked that. I kind of liked seeing that. It showcases that there is still some character growth with Otto. And yes, he's clearly getting his army based on necessity, which does still line up with Spider-Verse since he did the exact same thing there. But I do at least like that we see that character growth. So again, I dig that. It's nice. And on top of that, I like how the story continues on, and as we see how the tensions are continue to be raised from last issue to this one, as we see that despite the Spidey's best efforts, the Inheritors do manage to revive themselves and essentially reform their family, getting everybody back. And on top of that, there are now clear things that the Inheritors have to stop. There are now things that the Spideys now have to clearly stop, as the Inheritors are now making a new home base on Earth 616 that the Spideys need to stop from happening. And likewise, if the Inheritors want to truly come back to full strength, then they need Solus. And if they want Solus, they need the crystal with his essence in it from the end of Spider-Verse, which, yeah, odds are that would not come with them when they travel to Earth 616, so they need to go back to Earth 3145 physically and bring it back themselves. So yes, there's still some problems there for them, but at the very least, it gives us a tangible goal, and it still gives us some hope that while the Inheritors may be back, they don't have full power yet. So there's still a chance that they can be taken down. They can stop the base from forming, and if they can stop Solus from coming back, they can maybe get a chance at defeating them again. So I like that we see some more progression on that part. And while I still think the death of Karn is kind of dumb, at the very least, it does feel at least shocking, and we still get a bit of hope with, at the end of the comic, seeing that Gwen is alive, just trapped in another Earth. Which, yeah, like with Moreland going off to face Peter and his tie-ins, this also leads to another tie-in. So I'm not going to be talking about Gwen for a while in these books, at least until she enters back into the main story. Trust me, we'll get to what she was doing when we eventually look at her tie-ins. But on the whole, though, I do still like the issue. It does have some continuity issues from the previous Spider-Verse, and I still call into question the whole death of Karn and all that, but it still feels great, but it still keeps the tension, it still keeps raising the tension. It does have some honestly good character moments with the quote-unquote for death of Gwen Stacy when she tries to hold off the Inheritors from escaping from Otto's base. I like the tension when the Inheritors do come back and start setting their own goals in motion, which the Spideys have to fight with. And I like seeing the conflict between both sides of the Spider Army as they're now trying to figure out the best way to take the Inheritors out, and we see the leaders being formed from that, with Miles leading one side and Otto leading the other, and likewise even the character stuff with Otto as he's blaming himself for the Inheritors coming back, I think is legitimately good. I like that. So on the whole, it's still a good issue and keeps the tension going in a good way. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you on Thursday as we look at issue 3 of Spider-Geddon. So till then, hope you have a good day and take care.